My parents chuckled. Your kids will never be as successful as your brothers. Some people are just born to fall short. Their laughter cut through me like glass, sharp and deliberate. My children were in the next room, their innocent giggles muffled by the closed door. They didn't know their grandparents had just carved them into second-class citizens with a single sentence. I clenched my fists under the table, nails biting into my palms. My name is Claire Donovan. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because this is the night my parents learned what it means to underestimate a daughter who carried them on her back for years. Tell me, have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? I stood up so quickly the chair screeched across the hardwood floor. My father's smirk widened, mistaking my silence for surrender. My mother sipped her wine like she'd just delivered a casual truth, not a blade meant to gut me. Then tell him to pay all the bills, I said, my voice steady, too steady. Because I'm not sending money anymore. The room stilled. For years I had wired them thousands. Rent, groceries, medical bills, even their vacations. Every paycheck, a slice was carved off for them before I even thought about myself. They never asked where it came from. They never thanked me. They assumed it was my duty, like gravity pulling the earth. My mother's wine glass trembled. What money? We never got a cent from you. Her face was pale, but her eyes, those calculating, cold eyes, betrayed her. The lie hit me harder than the insult. She was rewriting history right in front of me, erasing the years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of working double shifts just to make sure they never missed a payment. My brother leaned against the doorway, smug as always. His kids were the golden grandchildren, the ones showered with praise and gifts. He never lifted a finger for them. He never had to. I had been the safety net all along, hidden beneath his shadow. Of course, my father chuckled again. She exaggerates. Always the victim. Victim. The word burned. I looked at them, really looked. Two people who had drained me dry only to spit on the life I was building. My kids deserved better than this cycle of cruelty dressed as family. Something inside me cracked that night, but it wasn't weakness. It was resolve. They thought cutting me down would keep me obedient. Instead it lit the fuse. And when a daughter who's been silent too long finally speaks, her words can burn everything to the ground. That was the night I stopped being their provider. But it was only the beginning of my revenge. Silence. That's what followed my words. Thick, suffocating silence. My parents stared at me like I'd grown horns. My brother smirked, the corners of his mouth twitching with the arrogance of a man who'd never paid a bill in his life. Claire, my mother whispered finally, her voice dripping with faux innocence, what are you talking about? You've never given us $1. Not one. Her denial was almost elegant in its cruelty. As if the late nights I spent scrubbing hospital floors never happened. As if the checks I mailed, the transfers I made, the groceries I shipped, all of it, were figments of my imagination. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only sound my body could make before the rage consumed me. You know what? I said, leaning forward so she couldn't escape my gaze. I've got every receipt. Every transfer. Every message where you begged me to cover for you. My father shifted in his chair. His jaw tightened. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He also knew the truth was a liability in a house built on favoritism and lies. My brother chuckled under his breath. Maybe you should have kept better track of your money, Claire. No one asked you to play hero. I turned toward him slowly. No one asked. That's right. But I did it. I saved them. And all it bought me was their contempt. And you standing there, living off the illusion that you're the successful son while I paid the price for your glory. His smirk faltered for just a second and I caught it. The mask slipping. My kids ran and then, chasing each other, their laughter a piercing reminder of who I was really fighting for. They froze when they saw my face, when they felt the tension in the room. My daughter, just 9, clutched my arm. Mom? Are you okay? I forced a smile for her, but inside something hardened. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I allowed my parents to belittle me, to erase my sacrifices, my children would grow up believing their worth was tied to someone else's approval. I wouldn't let that happen. So I stood taller. My voice sharpened. From this day forward, not a single cent leaves my hands for this house. You want your bills paid? Ask your golden boy here. My brother laughed, but it was strained now. My father's face flushed with anger. My mother set down her wine glass so hard it cracked against the table. You're ungrateful, she spat. We gave you life and this is how you repay us? I smiled, cold and steady. You gave me life, yes. But you also taught me how not to live it. And for that I am grateful. The air was thick, electric. I knew the line had been drawn and once crossed there was no going back. They thought I was bluffing. But I never bluff. That night I began cutting ties. Not just financially but emotionally. And when I cut deep. I watched them scramble like children when the safety net vanished. The first week was small sabotage. Late fees slipped onto their accounts, courtesy of payments I redirected to my own savings. I set up autopay on my terms, rerouted money where it would actually help my kids, not pad the comfortable lives of people who called me inferior. My brother called me selfish. My mother accused me of cruelty. My father slammed doors and pretended nobility. They mouthed words meant to wound, but their eyes kept darting to the mailbox, to their phones, to the empty space where comfort used to live. They were excellent at pretending everything was fine until the fine print arrived. The utilities notice came crisp and official. The landlord's voicemail vibrated with a different tone. I watched from my kitchen window as a courier left a paper at their stoop and felt the first real rush of power. Small, legal, impossible to scream at me for. You're going to regret this, my brother warned over a choked dinner when he tried to charm me back into compliance. His grin plastic, his desperation obvious. He had never been tested. Privilege had been his unearned armor. I started to enjoy seeing it dented. But revenge isn't just about letting bills pile up. It's strategy. It's patience. It's forcing the people who erased you to read the ledger of their own consequences. So I did something else. I pulled together every story they'd told at family gatherings. Those stories where I was the punchline, that eccentric daughter who chose her passion over a tidy life. I found old photos, receipts, the names of the doctors they relied on when they were sick. The ones they refused to admit were mine. I didn't leak them. Not yet. I framed them. I created a quiet dossier of truth and mailed copies to places that would sting. The neighborhood association, the alumni board my brother secretly coveted, a marketing group that always handed him the best opportunities. I called a lawyer, just to ask to see how far the paper trail might reach. The lawyer's voice was clinical and I loved it. If you have documentation, you have leverage. Leverage felt cleaner than anger. It felt like writing a balance sheet tilted by years of emotional credit theft. My mother tried to play the wounded martyr at a Sunday brunch. Soft voice, tremulous lip, begging relatives to intervene. She wanted pity. She wanted to wash the stain I'd put on their reputation. The cousins murmured. The older aunt asked awkward questions. Someone offered to host Thanksgiving to bring everyone together. Their mouths were full of peace while their eyes searched for the exit. I accepted no invites. I refused to enter rooms where my worth was a rumor. One evening, when the house lights in their living room flickered as if to warn them, my daughter pressed her forehead against the window and whispered, "Will they be okay, Mom?" I cupped her face with both hands and told her honestly, "They'll survive. But we won't bow to the price of their approval again." As the lights went out next door, the street felt strangely honest. No masking laughter leaking through paper-thin walls, no staged stories floating into the night. For the first time in forever, their hush matched the courage that had grown inside me. And in that hush, I realized revenge often begins not with a shout but with a switch that leaves the world to sit in its own dark. The switch had been thrown. The silence didn't last. When the bills kept stacking and the neighbors started whispering, my parents sharpened their tongues. They called at odd hours, voices laced with venom. My father barked, "After all we've done for you, you dare humiliate us?" My mother hissed, "You'll poison your children against family. They'll grow up alone." Alone. The word stung, but only for a moment. Because the truth was I'd been alone all along. Funding their life, raising my kids, working double shifts while they toasted my brother's so-called achievements. But now, they were the ones isolated. The ones watching cracks spread across their perfect facade. My brother, though, he was different. He was desperate. He showed up at my job one afternoon, leaning against the hood of his spotless SUV like he owned the world. His voice was calm, practiced. "Claire, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Just keep helping them. Quietly. No one has to know." I laughed in his face. Not the brittle laugh of the past. A deep, unshaken one. "No," I said simply. His smirk faltered. "You don't get it," he tried again, lowering his voice. "They're telling people you're unstable. That you're lying about the money. If this keeps spreading, it'll ruin you, not them." There was the threat. Not fists, not screams. Reputation. Gaslighting dressed as warning. I leaned in until he had to meet my eyes. "Then let them talk. I've got the receipts, remember? Do you?" His jaw tightened, his carefully pressed shirt wrinkling under his fists. For the first time I saw it. Fear. I left him in the parking lot, watching his reflection warp in his SUV's glossy paint. That night I printed everything. Pages of bank transfers, screenshots of begging texts, emails with subject lines like, "Claire, we just need $400 more this month." I slid them into folders, labeled them neatly. Proof. And then, instead of sending them out immediately, I waited. Waiting was power. Meanwhile, the invitations stopped. Family dinners went quiet. Cousins who once laughed at my expense suddenly kept their distance, unsure which side of history they'd land on. My parents noticed. Oh, they noticed. One evening my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But something inside me wanted to hear the desperation. It was my mother. Her voice was tight, trembling, not with weakness but rage restrained. "Claire, whatever game you're playing, end it. You think you're strong, but you're tearing us apart." I closed my eyes, breathed in, and said the words that had been burning inside me for years. "No, Mom. I'm not tearing us apart. I'm just refusing to be the glue you walked over." The line went dead. And as I placed my phone on the counter, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about evening the score anymore. It was about freedom. About teaching them, teaching me, that the chains were always unlocked. The twist. I wasn't done yet. I was just beginning to show the world who they really were. They thought the leak would be a whisper. I made it a spotlight. I sent a single packet, careful, clinical, to a neighborhood newsletter, the alumni association that had always fawned over my brother, and one local blogger who loved scandal. I didn't smear. I laid out receipts like a surgeon places organs on the tray. Clean, undeniable, impossible to ignore. I didn't aim to destroy them for sport. I aimed to make their mirrors honest. Within 48 hours the tone changed. The alumni board sent an inquiry to my brother's firm, wondering about discrepancies in donations he'd boasted about at a recent gala. The neighborhood group stopped promoting the charity event my parents used to headline. The blogger wrote a piece that barely lifted a pen to judgment. She let the documents do the talking. The comments section filled with questions. Sharp, polite, insistent. People began to ask for proof where once they'd accepted charm. My brother called me 3 times that day. The 4th call I let go to voicemail. In it his voice was a thin thing. No swagger, no jokes, only panic. "Claire, you don't know what you're doing. This will ruin me." He always said "you don't know" when he meant you don't belong. My mother texted begging. My father left a message where he tried to sound wounded and wronged. I listened to each plea like a doctor listens to a dying patient. Clinical, detached, measuring time. But the cost showed up in other places. The kids' school called asking if I'd like to speak at a parent meeting about family responsibility. A woman from my daughter's ballet class avoided me in the parking lot, her eyes apologetic but distant. Old friends sent lukewarm messages about staying neutral. Even my landlord, who'd been friendly for years, asked me if this family drama might affect the neighborhood. His voice full of calculations. The cruelty wasn't just theirs anymore. It was contagious. People prefer a neat story, heroes and villains marked in bold. I had blurred the lines and now watched relationships rearrange themselves like tectonic plates. That night, my daughter crawled into my lap with a school project clutched in her small hands. An essay about what I want to be when I grow up. She wanted to be kind, she wrote, and brave, and a teacher. She didn't put successful in $. She put faces. The woman who taught her to tie shoelaces, The neighbor who read on rainy days, a mother who never quit. "How do you feel?" she asked, tracing a smudge of glue with her thumb. I wanted to tell her the truth and shield her the lie. I wanted to tell her that I was proud and terrified, triumphant and regretful. Instead, I folded the paper, smoothing the creases as if I could iron out consequence. "I feel like we're standing in the middle of a storm," I said. "And we're finally holding an umbrella." He smiled like it was simple. Simple only because children keep the world uncomplicated by force of hope. The next morning, the firm called my brother in for a conversation. My parents woke to emails asking for clarification about funds they'd never admitted to receiving. They painted themselves wounded in public, but in private their voices shook. And somewhere in the middle of the noise, I heard a new sound. One that wasn't my mother's indictment or my brother's cowardice. It was my own voice, low and steady, telling me that I had done something like bravery, naming the ledger of my life, refusing to pretend the debt I paid was gratitude. The twist: when you expose a house of cards, you never know which card will fall on someone you love. I had awakened a small quake that would rearrange more than just their pride. But the tremor also cleared the air, and for the first time in years I could breathe without checking the price. The storm had a name now, truth, and it tasted like rain on my tongue. The storm didn't pass, it gathered. My parents had always been skilled performers, slipping into the role of the dignified couple who sacrificed everything for their children. But the spotlight I turned on them burned hotter than they could bear. They scrambled, weaving new lies to patch the old. My brother tried damage control, calling colleagues, insisting the blog was a smear campaign. But whispers are hard to drown once the evidence is public. His boss called him into closed-door meetings. The same coworkers who used to laugh at his jokes now avoided his eyes in the hallway. I could almost hear the echo of their faith breaking. And yet, the more their walls crumbled, the louder the blame landed on me. "You're destroying this family," my mother screamed one night over the phone. Her voice cracked, not from grief but fury at being unmasked. "You destroyed it years ago," I replied, calm as still water. "I just stopped hiding the wreckage." The words cut her, I knew they did. But I wasn't finished. I began pulling back every thread they'd used to bind me. I canceled the credit card my name was tethered to, the one they swore they never touched. I closed a joint account I'd set up when Dad begged for just a little emergency cushion. Each click of confirmation felt like a door shutting, final, irreversible. But with every tie I cut, I felt my body tremble, not with fear but with something sharper, guilt's shadow. Revenge feels clean in theory, but in practice it drips. My daughter came home from school with questions. "Why does Grandpa say you're mean? Why does Uncle say you made him lose his job?" I tucked her hair behind her ear, forcing my voice steady. "Sometimes people lie when they're scared. But one day you'll see the truth." Still, doubt curled in my chest like smoke. Was I protecting my children, or was I dragging them into my war? Then an unexpected blow. A letter arrived. A legal notice. My parents had consulted a lawyer, claiming I was fabricating financial records to slander them. Defamation. Slander. Words heavy enough to break even the strongest resolve if handled poorly. I held the papers in my hands, my pulse steady. This wasn't shock, it was recognition. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to silence me. I called my lawyer that night, the one who told me leverage was power. He read the notice, his tone dry, almost amused. "They won't win this. You've got the documentation. This is intimidation, nothing more." Intimidation. My whole life they had used it as currency. Mockery, favoritism, silence. This was just another form of it, wrapped in legal ink. And I realized something. Their empire had never been love. It had always been control. And control only works when someone plays along. I wasn't playing anymore. So I didn't cry, didn't crumble. I began preparing something else. Something final. Because revenge isn't just fire. Sometimes it's the quiet ruin that comes when truth is spoken under oath. And I was ready to speak. The court smelled of old wood and nerves. I sat at the plaintiff's table, papers stacked neatly in front of me. My parents were across the aisle, my brother behind them like a soldier who'd already lost his war. They looked smaller there, framed not by chandeliers or family portraits but by a judge's shadow. My lawyer whispered, "Stay calm. The truth is heavy enough." Their attorney tried to paint me unhinged, a bitter daughter inventing fantasies, exaggerating sacrifices. Each word rolled off him like smoke, thick and insubstantial. But then came my turn. I rose. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't break. "Every month for 12 years, I said, laying down copies of bank transfers, I sent money. Not out of obligation, but because I believed family meant carrying each other. Here are the texts begging me to cover rent. Here are the emails asking for medical payments. Here are receipts for groceries delivered across state lines." The judge's brow tightened as the pile grew. Every page a scar. Every signature a truth they could no longer erase. My mother stared at the desk, her face pale. My father shifted, jaw tight. My brother, he couldn't look at me. And when I stopped, I continued, my throat thick but steady. "They rewrote history. They said none of it happened. That I was unstable. That my children would never be good enough. That I was less." The silence after my words was louder than their chuckles had ever been. Their lawyer fumbled for objections, but the judge raised a hand. "The documentation is clear. There is no case for defamation here. This court does not exist to sanitize family disputes." Dismissed. Just like that. But the dismissal wasn't the victory. It was what came after. Because the court records were public. Anyone could see them. Neighbors, colleagues, alumni boards. No blog post, no rumor mill, just cold legal fact stamped with the state seal. By the time we walked out, the air outside felt different. Free. Honest. My parents rushed past me, faces rigid, no eye contact. My brother trailed behind, his once proud shoulders hunched. For the first time in my life, they didn't look untouchable. They looked human. Fragile. I should have felt triumphant. That I felt clean. The weight I had carried for decades, the silence, the obligation, the denial, wasn't mine anymore. I'd handed it back in front of the world. That night, I sat with my kids at the kitchen table. My daughter traced circles on the wood. "Mom," she whispered, "does this mean it's over?" I looked at her, at the boy beside her building towers from toy blocks. Towers that leaned but didn't fall. Towers made from small, honest pieces. "It means," I said softly, "we get to start again. Without lies." But inside me, one truth still flickered. Endings aren't just freedom. They're also a mirror. And tomorrow I would finally hold that mirror to my parents' faces. Because poetic justice wasn't in the courtroom. It was at home where the story began. The knock came on a Sunday morning. I opened the door to find my parents standing on the porch. No lawyers. No polished smiles. Just two tired figures weathered not by age but by truth. My brother wasn't with them. He'd vanished into silence after the court records spread like wildfire. Colleagues distancing, promotions evaporating, his reputation cracked beyond repair. For once, my parents didn't look like the powerful architects of my shame. They looked like tenants in a house they'd built on sand, and the tide had finally come in. "Claire," my mother began, her voice brittle, we want to talk." I stepped aside, not out of forgiveness but strength. My children watched from the living room, quiet as church pews. We sat. The same dining table where they'd once chuckled about my kids' futures now held their silence like a hostage. My father spoke first. "We never thought you'd..." He stopped. Corrected himself. "We never thought you'd stand up like that." I leaned forward, my eyes steady. "You never thought I'd stop paying for your comfort. That's all this was. Money. Control. And when I finally said no, you tried to erase me." My mother flinched. "We only wanted the best for the family." "The best." I laughed, low and sharp. "You wanted a provider you could belittle. A daughter who carried your weight while you praised the son who never lifted a finger. You didn't want the best. You wanted obedience." They said nothing. For years I had begged for their approval, for one word of pride. Now I didn't need it. The silence between us wasn't a wound anymore. It was a verdict. I stood. My children rose with me. "You asked once if my kids would ever be as successful as his. Look at them." My son's tower of blocks stood tall on the floor, steady despite its crooked edges. My daughter's essay lay open on the counter, words in her small handwriting. I want to be kind. I want to be brave. Success, I said quietly, isn't in your money. It isn't in your approval. It's in the fact that my children will never grow up thinking love is a transaction. My parents' eyes darted to the floor. For once, no denial came. No chuckle. No erasure. Only silence, heavy, irreversible. I walked them to the door. My mother tried to touch my arm, but I pulled back gently. This is where it ends, I whispered. You don't get to rewrite me anymore. The door clicked shut. I turned to my kids. They stared up at me, eyes wide, waiting for the verdict of my own heart. And I smiled. A real smile. The kind that comes when chains fall quiet on the floor. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim or a provider or a shadow of my brother. I felt like myself.